I'm Mike Breen, Public Awareness Officer for the American Mathematical Society, and I'm talking with Mac Hyman, who is the Evelyn and John G. Phillips Distinguished Professor in Mathematics at Tulane University. And we're talking about COVID-19, especially the modeling of it. And Mac, before we get to the modeling part, we read about New Orleans in the news and maybe see it on TV, but we're not there. Can you tell us what it's like there in New Orleans?
Well, I can tell you Mardi Gras this year was just like any other Mardi Gras. It was one of the greatest festivals on earth, and no one was thinking about COVID-19 at all. It was completely out of our minds. The day after Mardi Gras, the Wednesday after Mardi Gras, was the first community-based transmission in the US. And it hit New Orleans like a freight train. 2 weeks after Mardi Gras, the mayor issued a stay-at-home order, and the seriously ill started coming into the hospitals. And by seriously ill, I mean, I live next to a retirement center. It's not a large one. It's a multi-story building, apartment complex where people share meals and share exercise. 14 people have died there in just the past 2 weeks. I mean, it is devastating all through parts of the city. So 2 weeks after Mardi Gras, we had the city was at a stay-at-home order. A week after that, Tulane decided to shut down. We shut down for a week to give all the students that could go home a chance to go home. And since then, all the classes have been by Zoom, which is happening pretty much across the country. It's been going smoother than we expected. I think it takes a lot of extra effort to prepare the classroom, but I don't think there's really been a loss in student learning and interaction. The day-to-day things in New Orleans, well, the stay-at-home order, I see that's much like sending your children to their room to get their act together, to have a timeout, because we need to learn. I hate this term social distancing. It's not just social distancing, it's prophylaxis. Prophylaxis means behavior that you have that prevents or reduces the chance of transmitting an infection from one person to another. And physical distance is one aspect. If you're within 6 feet of a person that's infected and they sneeze, you can get infected. It's an airborne virus. Fomites is the other big word. Fomites are any surface that can be infected. So when the droplets land on a surface or your infected hands touch a surface, the virus lives on. And for diseases like the flu and influenza, we don't worry about this too much. In a couple of hours, that virus is no longer viable, it dies. This COVID virus is really a strong cookie. I mean, there have been tests that shown it can live for several days on surfaces. And surfaces are like money, coins, doorknobs, furniture, hand railings, things that we touch every day without thinking about it. And so it's not just keeping our physical distance, but we also have to be aware of how do we handle these fomites, that we wipe down our hand railings, we wipe down our money or credit cards. And so we're being sent to our room until this becomes the normal behavior, that we learn to act in ways that can prevent this virus from changing. And I can say in New Orleans, even with the devastation we've had, it's been very slow in coming. The week after the stay at home, I went to the supermarket shopping, and I wore my gloves, I wore my mask, and I think I was one of 3 people in the entire supermarket. I went again last Sunday, and I think I was one of 10 people still. So it's going up, but it's not going up nearly as quickly as it needs to so that we can reopen these businesses. And we'll only get back to more normal behavior when this becomes the new normal. So what's happening in New Orleans, we're still learning how to behave. And other than that, we're getting by day at day. People are observing the social distance very well. I know that answers your question. So the city as a whole is reacting to it. Now, the normal way New Orleans reacts to a disaster is we throw a party. We have 2 or 3 festivals every weekend. And it's been really hard not to have the music and the food and the party for this, because it's just in our blood. When things get tough, we get going, and we're missing that.
Now you mentioned party and timeouts, Max. So to me, that makes me think, when let's say it's not over, but if we say that when it's over, the people are naturally going to want to party all over. Is that a wise thing to be doing at that time?
Of course not. I mean, what we're doing now, what we're seeing, the cases that we're seeing now. Now we're not seeing infections, by the way. When people count cases, we're at least in New Orleans and Louisiana, we're counting tests. The tests originally were coming back 40%, 30% infected. Now the tests are still 15 to 20% infected. So the number of cases that you see in this explosion in Louisiana is based on the explosion in the number of tests. And those that are infected that we find, because we don't test unless they show symptoms, were people that were infected 2 weeks ago. Okay, so when the numbers start finally to come down, if we do remove these restrictions and we go back to our old ways, the reproductive number, the chance of it spreading is just as great then as it was at the beginning of the epidemic. Most of the people in the city and the United States have not been infected. And what slows it down is often the herd immunity is the only way to slow it down until we have a vaccine, unless we change our behavior. So the worst thing we can do is to go back to normal party behavior. On the other hand, I think social events where we maintain this prophylactic behavior could be perfectly fine. We just realize that we don't know if any of us are infected. Because the other big thing about this virus is that people that are asymmetric can still be infectious. And one thing we found in the modeling is this personal protection, disposable gloves and masks are by far the most important for people that are infected. Far more important for an infected person to be wearing these gloves than a susceptible, because that infectious person could infect dozens, if not more, of other people. So that answer your question somewhat, Mike? Or?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah. And then I think you said asymmetric and meant asymptomatic. Is that right? Because I'm definitely
asymptomatic. Yes, it's actually both. So it's asymptomatic people, but it's asymmetric protection.
Oh, okay.
So if a susceptible person wears gloves and a mask, they're protecting one person from getting infected. From a public health viewpoint, that's okay, but from a medical viewpoint, it's great. But from a public health viewpoint, the person you want to have wearing the mask and the gloves is an infectious person, because someone you think is infectious, they're the ones that you want to keep the virus from getting out. So if you put gloves and a mask on an infectious person, you may prevent a dozen or more infections. So it's the asymmetric impact of prophylactic behavior.
Okay.